No, sir. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'll try and run with here. I'll just need to share my screen for it. Okay. I'll do it with video. Okay, we can. That's the first thing you do. Just FYI, Chris, if Ed doesn't make it and I go ahead and present, I have a message here that says the host has disabled screen sharing.
You go down to the share screen button on the bottom.
Looks like it's going to let me now. But we'll, do you still want to wait on Ed? Okay. He might be connecting to audio.
It is very likely that I won't be on this entire session. Our internet connection over here is totally at the whim of someone. It goes up and down constantly.
Yeah, he's on the screen, but he's not got any audio and no picture. I take it Michelle doesn't have any power yet? Oh.
What could possibly go wrong with that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there's no off-gassing with that thing like that. No.
Oh, heck no. I guess that's better than having to run a extension cord across the street to your neighbor on the other side of the street in order to get power. Yeah, they had power on one side and not on the other side.
Hey, I got a question for everybody. Well, last night I stuck my nose out the back door and marveled at how cold it was, but also it was a beautiful, clear night. Orion was clear as a bell, and so was Sirius. And I also said, well, dang if I'm going to do any stargazing tonight because it's too darn cold. But it leads me to ask for everybody, what's the coldest weather you've ever observed in?
Well, let me see. That would be with George when it was 18 degrees at Thompson Foundation, I think. Or maybe it was, yeah, I think it was 18 or 28. I don't remember. It was cold.
I set up one time on our farm and it was 17 below zero, but I was acclimated to it then. We had a farm in Indiana and I had a telescope on. Okay.
Hey, Ed, this is Jerry. Do you want me to go through your slide deck? Oh, sure. Just ask him if he wants me to go ahead and do his slide deck presentation. Yep, I'm ready. Yeah. All right, sounds good. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our monthly meeting for Fort Worth Astronomical Society. My name is Jerry Gardner. I'm going to step in the interim. The meeting format this evening is going to be slightly different. We have a few folks that are out. Our opening statement that we normally take care of will not happen this evening. We're basically going to just jump straight into the presentation, which is a really neat little presentation on remote observing. So we'll go ahead and get started. Can everyone see the screen? All right. Let me put this in presentation mode. See if that'll work. Okay. So we have a pretty cool program tonight. Our Vice President, Ed, collaborated with a couple of the imagers and put together a little slide deck on remote observing. We're going to talk a little bit about a few different things. One of the main reasons that makes this a really neat little deal is take a look outside. Look at the weather we have been having. If you have a remote setup situated in another part of the country or in your backyard, you can literally log into the computer from the comfort of your own home and do a screen share or a team share with peer-to-peer software, or however you want to manage that, and literally just sit on your couch and control your session. Whether you're imaging or just viewing, it doesn't really matter. You can remotely control your telescope very easily from the comfort of your home. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about this evening. We're going to kick it off with why and how. Whys, basically what we just kind of talked a little bit about. You got personal comfort, and also anyone who might have any type of a physical impairment, it also works to their benefit as well. You also have access to distant or unique locations. Maybe you want to do some imaging in Australia and grab the Southern Hemisphere objects, the Southern Cross, the Large Magellanic Cloud. There's a really nice array of targets and imaging opportunities in the Southern Hemisphere viewing. It also allows you to isolate the telescope from any type of vibration, body heat, walking around the telescope, additional light sources. We'll touch a little bit on the light source thing in just a few minutes. And just like I mentioned a second ago, you can also take advantage of renting equipment. Maybe there's a facility in Australia that will allow you to rent a telescope, and we will talk a little bit more in detail about those and how they operate, some of the pros and cons in just a little bit. But that would cover why remote observing or imaging would be really good or beneficial for someone. How it's done, there are a few different methods. You can hardwire your setup. Let's say you're set up in your backyard. You can run USB cables and Ethernet cables up to approximately 300 feet, and that will allow you to stay hardwired. There's also the advantage of Wi-Fi. Again, up to approximately 300 feet or so, depending on your Wi-Fi signal. If you're trying to manage Wi-Fi, your internet connectivity will also play a factor, because you will need the internet if you want to remote desktop over to another PC, which I'll talk a little bit more about some of those computer setups in just a bit. But that's kind of how it would be done. And with that being said, I'll go on to the next slide. Let's talk a little more in depth about the whys. So again, personal comfort or overcoming physical limitations. The heat or the cold can make observing both physically uncomfortable and challenging. Yeah. Have you ever observed on a hot summer night? It can be quite warm. If you're trying to image remotely on a hot summer night, you have cooling characteristics of the camera that you have to depend on. Maybe you have some mobility concerns. This is a really good reason to research some remote options. And if you don't have the ability to set up your own equipment, there's people out there that can help you do this. Or you can take advantage of some of the other remote observing sites across the country. There's a popular one that rents use called itelescope.net. Basically, what you can do with them is purchase points and then trade your points in for usage, or you can locate somebody that will literally just rent you their setup. I know we have a member by the name of Preston Starr. He has a facility out in West Texas. He will work with anyone to get some time on some of his available options. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be anything specific. You can just image, you can view, you can play around with the software, you can learn. I believe he even has some teaching opportunities. So that's definitely one of the reasons why you would want to do it. Another reason would be obviously if you can't get away from the city, maybe you have a work life that or a family life that keeps you pretty close to home. As with most of us, you know, this in my situation is no different. I have a 4-year-old. But these dark sky sites are positioned in the darker parts of the world, so it makes the decision pretty simple. Either you can take your own equipment to one of these sites, or you can again rent some time. Remote operation will also allow observing from all over the world, and this is true. I do know. There are some facilities for rent, or some facilities that have telescopes for rent in Australia, and I'm sure in other parts of the world. I don't know all of them, but I'm sure a quick Google search will come up with some. I believe you can get some time on some systems. There's a company called itelescope.net, and they have a setup. I'm sure they have multiple setups positioned in Australia, as well as the Sierra remote regions of Northern California. It also allows you to isolate your equipment. Maybe you have physical impairments that restrict you from continuing to load equipment up in your car all the time. Anytime you want to go image or view, this allows you to keep something remotely. And then, of course, as we touched on very briefly, you've got heat sources, body heat, computer heat, stray light from headlamps and computers. It helps to have, you know, while you're in a dark sky, it helps to, and I'm going to touch a little bit about this in a minute, but, you know, there's not always a dark situation in a remote site, but you can make it dark. And, you know, the computers and the little gizmos and gadgets that you attach to your setups have little LED lights. And for the life of me, I'll never understand why some of them are extremely bright. I mean, blinding sometimes. It's really easy to mitigate that. You can just take, you know, tape and put tape over your equipment that you need to, you know, tone the luminosity down some on. renting equipment, obviously, this gives you access to high dollar equipment. You can, I know of one facility that will allow you to kind of pay as you go. You can buy points and then trade the points in on telescope time. And depending on the level of remote setup, maybe it's only 120 points for an hour's worth of use on a refractor with an older style camera. It might cost you 450 points to get an hour's worth of time on that big fancy 24-inch RC with a $25,000 camera attached to it. So the options are there. It just depends on what your needs are and how you want to pursue it. Obviously, this allows you to also gain access to specialized equipment for unique projects you might be working on, and also allows you to try before you buy. Maybe you want to experience a certain camera or a certain telescope system before you go make a big purchase. This is a really good way to do that. And what needs to be controlled from a distance? Well, obviously, you have to be able to start up and shut down your equipment. You have structure control, such as the dome. If you're in charge of the remote observatory itself, then you'll have structure control, dome opening, the rotation of the roof, etc. However, if you lease a pier from an observatory that has an available pier, then you're really just worried about, in many cases, someone else choosing whether the observatory is to be opened or closed based on weather, and then you will be in charge of kind of waking the telescope up and positioning it with onboard software. And that kind of leads us into the next point. You got telescope pointing, tracking, guiding, camera control, focus control, filter selection, imaging, video acquisition, image file storage. I'm going to touch a little bit about that one. Have a real good tip for that one. Telescope parking shutdown. This is generally all done on the computer. Weather monitoring, weather stations, all sky cams that view the sky so you can see the clouds, where the moon's at, and then obviously information data transfer, whether it be hardwire, Wi-Fi, or internet. Before I go to the next slide, I'm going to touch on this very briefly. One of the pieces of hardware that you'll definitely want to consider if you are planning to build your own setup is a peer computer. Or it doesn't have to be a peer computer, but a dedicated PC, something for you to remote into, something that will allow you to install your software and do astronomy stuff. And this is a little guy that I built a couple of years ago. It's just a small box computer. It's really portable. It has 2 Ethernet ports on the back, 4 USB ports, an HDMI port, and then of course on the front we have 4 more USB ports, smart card reader, and this is the on-off button. And guess what this is? That's right, that's tape to cover up the LEDs. This little guy right here, believe it or not, has an i7 processor in it, a really nice quad-core processor, 16 gig of RAM. It has I want to say a 256 gig solid-state drive that's on board. It's been partitioned twice, or it has two partitions, the C drive and the D drive, and the D drive is utilized specifically for the downloading of astronomy files, imaging files. And the good part about you don't have to have a super huge hard drive on these little computers, because what you can do is basically take all of your images that you capture over a period of a project. Maybe you've got a 3 or 4 day project you're working on, and you can put your stacking software on that peer computer, and you can stack everything remotely. And then at the end of this routine, just transfer one file over the internet to your local computer or the computer you're working from at your home, instead of a bunch of files. And if you rent time at a facility, this can be done via their servers and their FTP, whatever they have set up for an FTP portal. You are able to retrieve all of your files, but I have a little bit of experience in the remote imaging, and I found it a lot easier being on my own to just go ahead and stack the pictures together on the peer computer, and then just transfer one file over and post-process that one. And then, of course, you'll end up on site maybe once, twice a year, and then you can just take a portable hard drive and transfer all your files at that time, so that you can keep them in a library. Anyways, that's just a quick tip. Okay. Hardwire, USB, Ethernet up to approximately 300 feet. Hand controllers are the first level of remote control. These are generally attached directly to the computer or the mount itself. But there are some ways to do this remotely depending on your mount selection. USB connections, I believe, I could be wrong about this, but a USB cable needs to be shorter than 16 feet. A USB cable, if it is longer than 16 feet, you're going to have some issues. So keep that in mind for your cameras, your onboard computers, and whatnot. Your Ethernet cable connections, I'm not a network guy. I'm not sure what the available length on Ethernet cable is, but it is my understanding that it can be quite a ways if you need it to, maybe even up to about 300 feet away. Wireless, again, this is going to depend on the boost of your signal. Onboard computers with Wi-Fi, example, the ASI Air or the ASI Air Pro, and then, of course, my little guy right here. This is one of those really small USB Ethernet adapters. But of course, I don't, me personally, I don't control this one with Wi-Fi. We hardwire this one in locally at the observatory, and that way it is plugged in directly to the internet routers located on site. If you go hardwire, just be sure to keep in mind, this really goes for the computer that would be attached to the mount, whether it's a peer computer or a laptop you're using for backyard. Your go-to tracking software for your equatorial or alt-az mount. Obviously, you'll need the computer with either an Ethernet card or USB port and monitor, a video or digital camera attached to the equipment, mount control software. This is normally loaded on the mounts controller as well. Camera control and capture software. These are items that will all be installed on your astronomy dedicated computer. Again, whether that be a small computer attached to a peer or a laptop. And of course, optional, you have guide scopes and off-axis guider for long exposures, guide cameras, guiding software, planetarium software. I wouldn't say these are needed for just general viewing, but some of these are definitely needed for astrophotography. The advantages and disadvantages of a hardwire, USB, or Ethernet option. For the advantages, you have reliable connections to equipment. Ethernet and USB have always proven to be pretty reliable resources. Every once in a while, you will get a bad USB cable, and sometimes it can be a bit difficult to track that problem down. So just be open about that. Carry extra USB cables with you in case you snag one, or in the same case, even maybe an Ethernet cable. If you're using Ethernet cables, have an extra on hand. If you feel like you're having a problem, there's always the process of elimination. Additional equipment and cost can be an advantage. You don't have to spend a ton of money on certain items. Most software is free or low cost. This is true. You do have several options out there for free software. To name a couple, Stellarium, Cartes de Ciel. Cartes de Ciel is basically another version of the Sky X. It's really similar. I don't want to compare the two, but it has a lot of the very same functions. Me personally, I never could use it very well, but I do know people are very successful with it. SharpCap, other software like that. This is a good place to start and work through process and issues before you make the jump to Wi-Fi or maybe installing remotely. Another good practice is if you ever plan to install remotely at an observatory with your own equipment, I would plan a trial run. Basically, set up in your backyard, get all your software, all your drivers talking to one another, get everything talking to one another and working the way it's supposed to work in your backyard. I prepared for a remote install one time. I set up in the backyard for 2 weeks, got everything talking to one another. You don't need a clear sky to do this. You just need to be able to see that the telescope is pointing in the general direction of where it needs to. If you're parking or performing go-tos, things like that, very, very, very beneficial to do this, because when it comes install time, you don't want to be working out a bunch of issues. Yeah, so you can put A and B together there. It's very helpful and beneficial on you and your pocketbook to get all of this tested out before you travel and perform the install. But the hardwired solution would be the most reliable, hands down. You're not dependent on anybody else's internet. You're not dependent on somebody else's equipment. And there are some things to kind of consider on that front. Disadvantages, you're limited in range. As I mentioned earlier, I think USB cables are only good to about 16 foot. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I do know Ethernet cables are capable of longer distances. learning multiple software packages. This is a disadvantage for anyone in astronomy. If you are an astronomer and you want to explore any type of remote option, you will have some software to choose from. You will have to figure out what it is exactly you want to do, what your goals are, and then start researching the software that will be right for you. Starting with the free software, because the free software will tell you whether or not you want to maybe jump up to another level. And of course, additional wires from moving equipment create snags and hazards. This is true. Moving telescopes, walking around your setup if it's in your backyard. Obviously, if it's in a remote setup, you'll want to cable tie everything together, keep everything nice and tidy. It's a very good practice. Hardware and software needed. Basic hardware, same as hardwire for wireless, but adding in a Wi-Fi adapter. Some mounts have this built in, some do not. Wi-Fi adapters for your imaging camera. These are available. I personally haven't experienced too much on the Wi-Fi front, but a lot of the newer technology is integrating Wi-Fi with their mounts, their cameras, and things like that. Remote control and capture software. This is definitely going to be needed for a remote situation. That way you can operate the camera and the capture routine or the workflow remotely. Advantages: eliminating wires, physically connecting the computer and the camera and telescope mount. Disadvantages: limited range, multiple Wi-Fi signals, and running programs. If you've ever been to a big star party like TSP, they will not allow little Wi-Fi boosters or Wi-Fi operation of your telescope because of the interference. And so just keep that in mind. That doesn't really, what I just mentioned doesn't really involve remote observing, but to just kind of talk a little bit about the Wi-Fi signals, that's one of the disadvantages for sure. Complicated and adds potential software, firmware conflicts, and additional points of failure. This is true. Wireless, it can have these problems. The signal can drop. You can have spotty communication with your hardware and your software. Anytime you can hardwire, if you're going to plan a remote observatory or any type of remote imaging of your own, hardwire as much as you can, because it's just going to be very beneficial in the long run for you. Less headaches. Wireless with an onboard computer. I wouldn't recommend this, but again, you will need hardware and software for that, most likely drivers. Again, when you're remote, the less drivers you have to deal with, the better it's going to be for you. Just like we talked about a little bit ago, an on-telescope computer is very beneficial. Software, same as hardware for Windows-based computer or alternate with integrated software package. A good example of this is the ZWOASI Airproof, which I believe Robert will talk briefly about here in just a few moments. But this is basically a dedicated computer for remote operation or imaging, in lieu of building your own computer. Onboard computer is connected to all the equipment and the mounts on scope, minimizing moving wires. This is absolutely true. And the closer the computer is to the mount, the shorter your wires are, the better cable management you can have. Onboard computers with dedicated software have integrated applications, go-to, plate solving, guiding, camera control, image capture, and storage. This is all very true and very beneficial. Disadvantages: added cost and possible equipment, compatibility, capability limitations. Yes, this little guy right here, I went ahead whenever I put this little guy together, I splurged a little bit on it because I knew it was going to be a peer computer. I knew I wanted the i7. I knew I wanted a good amount of RAM because I knew I was going to perform some post-processing routines on the computer and then transfer over the internet. So I believe it cost me about $1,000 to build that one, which isn't a terrible, price. But for this type of computer, it was a little pricey. You can actually get these taken care of a little lower in the price range. And of course, there's other options out there, just like we talked about with the ASI Air. And some people will even, I think, put a Raspberry Pi on their setup. There are other options out there. You don't have to go with one of these. This was built in 2016. So it's old. It's outdated. It's got Windows 7 on it. But it still works. And if it ain't broke, I'm not going to fix it. Okay, so now I'm going to turn this over to Robert Cargill, and he is going to talk a little bit about the ZWOASI Airproof. Robert, the room is yours. Uh-oh. He was available. I can do that. Sub-freezing temperatures. That's actually a really good question. I guess, are we talking about the telescope or the mount? Or both? Okay. So I do know, I don't have a ton of experience in this arena. The question that was put in front of me was, how do you protect your telescope and or your mount in sub-freezing temperatures? I do know from experience, generally, the mount and the telescope will be okay up to about 25 or so. Now, I do know that one of the mount manufacturers has a mount positioned in one of the pole sites. I can't remember if it's the North Pole or the South Pole. And I remember reading an article about some tips and tricks on the moving parts inside of a mount. And the trick that I read about was to not grease any of those connections. Your bearing connections, where bearings meet races, your moving parts that require any type of lubricant or grease, get rid of it. If you feel like you will constantly have your setup in really cold climate for a long extended period of time, I would say more than a couple of weeks, then if you don't plan to pull it into warmer climates, then I would exercise that. I think that was a very good tip. It made sense. I haven't been in that predicament myself, but it definitely made sense. Don't grease your bearings. Don't grease your any of your gears or things like that, because whenever you take delivery of a mount, you will have greased parts on the inside. As far as the telescope is concerned, I don't know of any issues regarding cold weather in general for the optics. I do know that obviously when things get cold, they shrink. When heat is introduced, they expand. This is why motor focusers are so popular in the remote imaging world, because as you are imaging or observing throughout the course of an evening, temperature fluctuations will cause a shift in focus. And the reason the focus has shifted is because the focal length has changed due to the shrinking optics. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what I got on that. Anything else? Okay, we'll move on, and if Robert comes back, we will get back with him. Okay. That's perfectly fine. Okay, internet. Let's talk a little bit about the internet and unlimited distance. This is true. If you have a connection to the internet, you can basically reach out to any of these remote sites in the world, or even the Hubble Space Telescope from your home location. The internet is a great thing. We use it every day. It's not specific to remote observing or remote imaging, but it has definitely become a tool for our everyday life. However, I will say there are different levels of internet speed and bandwidth. So just keep that in mind, because the level of speed and bandwidth that is on-site or on-prem at the hosting center, or where you lease your peer, or where you rent your setup from, will dictate how easily it is to transfer files. You know, if the remote site is operating off of a fiber channel, then obviously they've taken this into consideration. They've spent some money on their internet package, and of course, with that would come a premium if you plan to lease a peer with that institution or facility. Then I would expect they would factor that into the cost of the peer. You're getting premium internet in order to do all of your internet stuff. Keep that in mind. Obviously, your telescope can be part of a cooperative group where you can share time or ownership within the observatory, and even rent it on an hourly basis. This is very true. This is a very good point. Folks even purchase equipment. It happens all the time. couple of guys may team up, or ladies may team up, and one person may buy a mount, one person may buy a telescope, and the peer lease is a shared fee. And then, of course, you can work with one another or other members of your team to figure out who's going to image or use the setup when. A really good example is this. Let's say you have 4 people. One person buys the camera, one person buys the mount, one person buys the telescope, and then one person buys everything else. Okay, well, that's 4 people. And if you take an $800 a month peer lease fee and split that up, then you're only looking at $200 a month per person, right? While that's a little better, you still have to share the setup. But if this works and it works for your team, then it's a good way to save some money so that you don't have to absorb the cost of everything yourself. Telescopes could also be your equipment installed and hosted by the observatory. Absolutely, 100%. And this basically is the situation that puts the host in charge of things like opening the roof, maintaining the internet, maintaining the servers, and you pay a fee. And these fees range $200 a month, $800 a month. Premium sites with better internet cost more. Deep Sky West, they're one of the newer sites. Sierra Remote in Northern California, they have a good facility. New Mexico Skies, they have a good facility. Preston has a spot out in West Texas. He is the DSOC, the Dark Sky Observatory Collaborative. He's all about collaboration. So many of his setups are team involved. So, you know, if you want to learn more about some of these items, just reach out to me privately and I can give you some more details. But obviously, back on topic of the internet comes into play quite a bit because you'll need the internet in order to communicate with the site. You'll have unlimited access to your equipment and as well as some other advantages. Okay, so the next slide is a discussion by me on hosting equipment, private observatories. So I'm going to go ahead and lead right in. We talked a little bit about this little guy right here. This is the peer computer that is astronomy dedicated. It has fans. It does everything. And I can, honestly, when I first built this computer, it was faster than my gaming computer. And it processes faster than my computer. But of course, my gaming computer is a little old. It was built in 2006. It was built with the best of the best at that time. It's still functional today. So while it's dated, very dated by today's standards, this little computer that I have right here is faster than that one. And they both have i7s. They both run on Windows. But as I mentioned earlier, your costs will go up just a little bit, but this is a dedicated computer. You'll take this, you'll stick this on the side of the pier. It comes with a mounting bracket. By the way, I think you can still get these enclosures. This is called a shuttle, DS87. And it comes with everything you need except for the hard drive, the processor, and the RAM. I believe everything else is there, and the operating system, you'll have to install that. That's if you're a Windows person. Another thing that you'll want to consider in a remote location is this little guy right here. This is a web power switch. Basically it is the power strip that you would take out into the field with you. However, this one has an extra option. There's the Ethernet. You can attach this guy to the observatory's network and then over the internet punch in an IP address and turn these, let's see, 1 through 8 are remotely switched, and these last 2 over here are not remotely switched. They would always be on. So basically, you log into a web browser with the user ID and password, and you have 8 ports available to you to turn on and off. This is a very handy dandy utility. It will be needed because that is what you will use to power your peer computer, power your mount, power your cameras if they run off of the web power switch. Or if it's just your mount and your cameras are powered through your mount, then all you need to do is power up your mount, and then the power feeds through to your cameras. That was a really cool item when I learned how to use it and how it works, because again, all you need is the internet. And of course, if your equipment is 500 miles away, you can't just flip the switch. But what you can do is turn it on and off over the internet. And then of course, this little guy right here, if you go into the BIOS, it has an option to power back on if it is shut down. So you can shut it down and it will stay shut off. But let's say it reboots in the middle of the night, or you just want to turn the power switch on. So you turn the power switch to the computer on the web power switch, and then it automatically boots up the computer. Preston put me onto it. It sounded like a good option. Obviously, you want a good mount. You want a low maintenance mount that's dedicated for that type of viewing or imaging. There are options available, but right now, a really good option to explore for remote opportunities, if you're going to have your own equipment, is anything from the Paramount line. Yes, these mounts come with a premium, but there's a reason for that. It's basically a turnkey solution. It is 100% fully robotic. It's very easy to operate. Obviously, once you power it up, all you have to do is send a home command to the mount, and you're ready to go for the night. I mean, literally, it's that easy. If you're thinking about doing something like this, explore some of the more premium mount options. Not everything will be easily managed in a remote situation, but a Paramount definitely will. And you get software with the Paramount also. As far as the telescope itself, the optical system, you don't really need too many special items for remote imaging or viewing, other than an automated focus control. You want to be able to obviously power up your focuser on the web power switch and control the focuser through the software on board the computer. And then of course your camera, most of the cameras available today don't really need any special software or what have you to perform any remote tasks. The cameras today that are on the market are all of them will pretty much work, because in order to operate the camera, you're generally just connecting it to the computer with a USB cable, and then your guide camera will also connect to the computer. So with a USB cable. So now we're back on the USB cables and being hardwired. I wouldn't recommend Wi-Fi unless you really know what you're doing there. Stay hardwired as much as possible. It's just going to help you in the long run. More hosting equipment. Generally, if you're searching for an option to put your equipment in, sometimes you might have to buy the peer. Sometimes the host may provide the peer for you. If that's the case, they generally have peer sites inside their observatory that are compatible with different styles of mount. But you may be asked to buy your own peer, and depending on which mount you go with, you have options out there to purchase the peer. Let's see. Cables, USB cables, Ethernet cables. That's pretty much it as far as if you want to install your own equipment somewhere. Now, if you want to build your own observatory, that's a different deal. I kind of like to explain it. Basically, what you're trying to do is build a shed that has a removable roof. I've seen some people assemble these with garage door openers, where the garage door opener will open the roof. And then, of course, your garage door opener can be connected to your web power switch. There's also software available to control the roof. There's software available to control the dome if you have a motorized dome setup. And that's all I can really think about right now. If you're going to build your own observatory in a remote location that you can't get to very easily, keep things like on-site computers, air conditioners, cooling, and heating equipment in the back of your mind, because depending on where you want to do this and the resources available on that piece of property, you may or may not want to explore more fancy options, if you will, for accommodating yourself and your equipment. So I think that's pretty much it on that front. I can't think of anything else. Chris, do we have any questions?
Sorry, everyone, I had my mic turned off. So we don't have any further questions from YouTube. If anyone does have any questions on YouTube, go ahead and let us know, and we'll go ahead and answer best we can. Robert is back on, so we're going to try to go to Robert. Robert,
okay, Robert, you want to talk a little bit about the ZWOASI Airproof? Robert, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Are you ready?
Yes.
The floor is all yours, sir.
Thank you. Sorry about the internet trouble. I got it back. Hopefully, I'm not sure how long. My part of the automation story begins when I was using an Orion electric focuser. I thought it was pretty cool to sit there and focus, with the touch of a button. Well, that had a snowballing effect. And it's got to the point now where I use this little bad boy right here. It's the ZWOASI Airproof. It controls everything. And I do mean everything. From polar alignment to capture to parking the telescope, it does it all. It has 4 additional power ports, like for powering your cooler on the camera, to the mount, to the dew strips. And it also has 4 USB ports here. 2 of them are USB 2 speed, and the other 2 are USB 3 speed. The ones that are USB 3 is for capture and storage, while the other 2 is for guiding and connecting to the mount for the go-to capability. The reason for the ASI Airproof, well, it's fully automated. And now when I go out during the wintertime, especially back in 1st of January, it was cold outside. Not this cold, but it was cold outside. 3 other guys were standing outside, David, Zach, and another guy out in the cold. I was in my car, nice and warm, listening to the music, and I had my Android tablet there on the dash. I was monitoring everything from guiding to exposure to the capture to the images, everything. Of course, you do still have to set up the equipment. You still have to roughly polar align. Of course, I cheat. I use PoleMaster with the small 11-inch laptop. I do it that way because I'm very familiar with PoleMaster. And I'm not really too sure how accurate the polar alignment method is in the ASI Airproof. And of course, you can use your tablet or your phone. For some reason, I got to use a tablet. My phone won't work. It can either be on the Android system or it can be on the Apple system, ISO, Mac, or whatever you want to call it. Cost, there is some cost involved for having a fully automated system. You got to have an electronic assisted focuser, plus, not only the cables and stuff, you got to attach it on there. You got to have that. It's not necessary, but if you're wanting to go to the full automation route like I have, it's 100% necessary. And I'll even reiterate what Jerry Gardner has said in the past. Focus is one of the most key important parts of this hobby. If not, you can have $20,000 worth of gear and your picture looks like somebody drew it with crayons. It's not going to happen. So a batten-off mask will help you get pretty close, but the EAF will get you even much closer. Cameras, the ZWO ASI Airproof does support all ZWO dedicated Astro cameras without a hitch. However, it also does support some Canon and Nikon DSLRs. There is a list for them. However, it's the older cameras they do support, like the Canon T3i, T5i, and the 5D Mark II cameras along those lines. And I'm not sure about the Nikons. Yes, you got to have an EQ mount that is go-to capability. And that is one of the requirements you're going to have to get, is a mount that has go-to for it, on it. Without it, you're just sitting dead in the water. I have an Ioptron CM25 and also an Ioptron IEQ45 Pro mounts. It works beautiful with both of them. Also, the power requirements, you got to make sure you get feeding this with plenty of power. Not only 12 volts, but you got to make sure there is at least 5 plus 10 amps to power it. And also, ZWO does not recommend powering some cameras because their cooling requirements require 5 amps. And this only puts out 3 amps. So yes, you can use this to power the mount and coolers on some of the cameras. And of course, you can also power the EAF with it. But the EAF plugs in back of the camera because the camera has 2 additional USB 2 ports along with the electric filter wheel. And it's all transferred by the USB 3 cable. The reason why I like it is because it's easy, it's fast. Yes, when I got it back in September, I did have some issues, but I was able to work them out, and I've been getting pictures ever since. Matter of fact, I got some screenshots I like to present. Of course, this is the unboxing of the ASI Air Pro. It comes with all the necessary cables. It comes with a 64 gig memory stick, and it also comes with a 32 gigabyte micro SD card. Oh. I thought I had that minimized. Is that better? Okay. The ASI Air Pro comes with all necessary cables to connect it to the mount, and it also comes with a micro SD card that the operating system resides on. It's best not to put any pictures on there because that is the operating system, and it is mandatory that you back it up as soon as you get it out of the box. And it does come with a 64 gig memory stick. And since I'm getting the ZWO ASI Air 6200 camera, which is the full frame camera, the files coming off there are 120 megabytes in size. So I had to get a new memory stick, try it with it. I got one that's 128 megabytes in size, or gigabytes in size. It does work with it. So hopefully I won't have no issues with it. And of course, I got my ASI Air set up on my Explorer Scientific refractor. I got the guide scope plugged in, got the mount plugged in, everything's plugged in. And what is nice is that when I set it up, I have it set north, it's already polar aligned. Before I plug in the mount, I already go ahead and set the mount to home position, which is like you see it in the picture. After I plug it in, the ASI Air takes over. The ASI Air knows where the stars are at according to the GPS from the mount. And I think that's mainly it. And so I type in, say, M81, M82, and I press go, and it'll automatically slew over there. It'll do the plate solving. Once it's done, it'll pop, you'll see it after it takes an exposure, and it's right there. And there's quite a few neat features about the ASI Air where you can, when it plate solves, you can go in there and hit identify, and it'll show you what target you're on. Then you can also use the other one, detect stars, to see how well your focus is. And also what I like about this unit is it has the autofocus routine where where it will autofocus for you in between shots. I got mine set up for every hour. And of course, this is out at Thompson Ranch or Thompson Foundation. I think I just got finished taking a string of images with it. I'm done, but you can see I got the Pegasus power box on there. I use that to power everything, including the ASI Air Pro, which then it feeds everything else after that. And of course, I got this hooked up to my bigger mount. I'm just wanting to make sure it's communicating with each other. And of course, this is out again at Thompson. Here's a close-up with my Red Cat. After I got finished a night's worth of pictures. You can set up the ASI Air however you want to, and also got it set up using a TP travel link router. And the bad thing about this is it's encased in an aluminum enclosure, which limits the Wi-Fi signal. Well, since I got it hooked up by Ethernet cable to the router, now the signal is considerably stronger. So now I can sit in my car or go into the little clubhouse, sign my name in, and I'll still have a fairly decent strong signal there. So it produces its own Wi-Fi. You can log into it, has its own password, so you don't have to worry about somebody else trying to cut in, stuff like that. And it does have its own operating system, and it has all the necessary drivers. It has all the necessary stuff to get started. There's no additional drivers you got to download. However, there are updates you got to download from time to time. And I mean, it's pretty cool sitting there, you know, in the car while you're warm, and it's doing all the work for you. And next target, you just have to type it in and it'll automatically go there, sync plates off, and you can just start running your sequence. And that's, you know, that's the beauty of it. And yes, I'm old school. I like to find targets, you know, using a Telrad finder. But when the summertime starts coming around, you don't have that much time. You want the go-to for work like it's supposed to, and plates off like it's supposed to. And it's quick, it's accurate, and it'll get you going. And of course, this is with my Orion refractor. When I was out there last time taking a picture of M81 and M82, and this is one of my Astrotech's refractors. It's a 102, and I'm getting it ready, hopefully for this weekend out, if not next weekend. Oh, but that's some of it right there. I do enjoy the automation part of it. I mean, it's really nice to have. And, you know, I'm getting to the point where my eyesight is not all that good like I was 25 or so. And of course, having a big 10-inch tablet makes a big difference than trying to look at it on your phone, for one thing. But, you know, it's the future, especially for astrophotography. And also for visual, like Orion telescopes and some other companies, you know, like Celestron, they have their go-to systems too, and it's, you know, automated. You know, you can buy a big Dobsonian, it's a push to, you just put it in the object and press go, and you just move the telescope to that point, and you're on the object. And, you know, like the Celestrons, they have their alt-azimuth mounts, and it's basically the same way. You point it on the star so it knows where it's at, and then you just type in an object and it goes to it. You know, it's not only for astrophotographers, but it's also for visual. Like, especially if you're doing a club meeting out in the parking lot and you want to show a bunch of people, you know, you could have a TV screen set up with a camera, broadcast it to it, and show a lot of people. doing electronic assisted astronomy that way. And that's also kind of a beneficial thing of having a remote setup or an automated setup. You can do stuff like that. I think that's about it for now.
All right, great, Robert. Thanks for giving us an overview of that. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Pretty neat little utility you have there. So I've been thinking about picking one of those up myself. I'm playing around with it. So we'll see about doing that in the near future. I guess I'll go ahead and share the screen. And get back to the presentation. All right. So I will jump on to the next slide, and this is a little section in the slide where you can look at some Wi-Fi adapters for looks like for remote observing. Looks like Celestron has a Sky portal. Ioptron has a product, and Orion Starseek. And then, of course, the SimScan adapter by Skywatcher. You're welcome to take these links and research this equipment and see if it may or may not work for you. It's just another tool for the toolbox, right? Me personally, I have not experienced too many options as far as Wi-Fi is concerned. If I do branch out and go purchase one of the little ASI Airpros, that will be my first experience with it. Everything that I've experienced up to this point has been hardwire. So I think earlier I mentioned I wouldn't recommend Wi-Fi. It's not that I wouldn't recommend Wi-Fi, just with the technology the way it is today for a remote situation, practice. Set it up in your backyard. Be sure things are communicating well, because if you end up pursuing a remote option that happens to be relatively far away, your hosting plan might come with some on-site maintenance, but if it doesn't, you're driving 500 miles away to go maintain your equipment, repair it, fix it, figure out what's wrong with it. So just keep things like that in mind. Looks like we have some resources for onboard computers. There's the ASI Airpro link, StellarMate, the Sky Fusion by BISC. That's basically their version of an onboard computer, or their version of a small attachable astronomy computer. The little Eagle control unit, I have seen that one. I've not experienced it. It looks like it may also be something very similar to the ASI Airpro, just another option for the toolbox for you to consider. Reviews, discussion, and field tests. There are a few things to look over for reading material. There's some great reading material out there available. Those links have been provided on the attached presentation. And of course, there are several different websites for remote observing. These have been provided as well on the presentation. Let's see if I'm familiar with any of these. So the The first option, I don't know much about. The second option, iTelescope.net, they are a company that will allow you to purchase points with cash and then turn those points into time on any of their hosted telescopes. And they have a bunch. They have several situated in Australia, and they have several situated in Sierra Remote. But that is what that option is for. One thing I would like to kind of touch on with regard to iTelescope and any other entity that provides that type of service for you to purchase, rent, rental time on, or point system. Take in consideration the scheduling aspect of it, because sometimes you have to book these things out quite a ways in advance. And of course, the weather can't be predicted. The only thing that can really be predicted is the moon phase. So whenever you book time on these systems, oh, and back to the moon phase real quick, you do get discounts if you're doing some narrowband imaging and you want to do this with a 3/4 moon. iTelescope will offer discounts, and possibly even other entities providing that service. If let's say you just you don't want to do any RGB imaging, you want to image a nebula, image the rosette with a 3/4 moon. The rosette's on one side of the sky and the moon's over on the other side of the sky. They'll offer a discount for that, and your image will come out just fine. And the discount is being offered because you're doing it during a time when the moon is up and other imagers are less likely to be online. Just another thing to consider and think about whenever you're researching those options. I don't know much about bullet number 3 or bullet number 4. Grand Mesa appears to be a hosting site, as well as Sierra Remote. Sierra Remote is actually the hosting site for some iTelescope setups. Deep Sky West is a spot out in, I believe they're in Arizona. They're out in the middle of nowhere, but this place went deep in their pockets. Deep Sky West, they have a full fiber optic internet. They have 2 observatories. The sky is super dark, super dark. I mean, this place is literally off the grid. You can go read about their facility on their site. Martin Pugh, he is another option for renting time on equipment, and I believe he has some equipment set up in Chile as well as Australia, and some equipment here. He also, every once in a while, will have a pier lease come up available if you want to lease a pier. I haven't checked his pricing too much, but he does have a few facilities that he leases piers on, so you can go to his website and look up some of that information. Deep Sky Chile, I believe, is another hosting option. They, I believe, are located in Chile, as the name would suggest. And the Dark Sky Observatory, that is Preston's site, I do believe, out in the Davis Mountains. And something about that site, Preston is pretty reasonable on prices, but he works with each individual on a personal level. That facility has some of the darkest skies I've ever seen in my life. His facility is situated on the top of a mountain in the Davis Mountains in West Texas, in Fort Davis, at 6,100 feet elevation, and the transparency and the scene are just phenomenal. All of my best CCD images came from that site. And it wasn't because I did a good job on capture or I did a good job on focus I mean, obviously focus is mandatory, but the seeing is so good there. Things are just so much clearer than the stuff that you capture in the city. So, I mean, these facilities have great benefits. The skies are just super dark. And if you're considering doing anything like this, I would recommend it. If you can afford it, it's a nice option for taking care of your need for this hobby, and you know, still being able to live at home with your family and your kids. I have a 4-year-old, so I remember when she was born, I would hold her in my arm with one arm in the bottle, just kind of positioned like this. And then while I'm feeding her, I'm operating a remote imaging session out at Preston's place. It was a good time. It was very beneficial for me to be able to do that and still stay at home and take care of my family. So just some things to consider. And it looks like that's the end of the slide deck. So I'm going to stop share and turn this back over to Chris. Chris, I am done, and hope everybody enjoyed that.
Thank you very much, Jerry. I'm looking at, I see Ed here. Ed, do you want to, or can you hear us? Can you get on?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. We can see you.
Oh my goodness. For the last hour and a half, I've been reloading Zoom and killing sessions and rebooting the computer. It's been a nightmare. But first of all, Jerry and Robert, thank you so much for covering on that. I appreciate it. I know it was kind of the last minute. Jerry jumped in when I just could not get back in on Zoom to cover everything. So appreciate it. Thank you so much. The other thing I wanted to mention is I wanted to put this together in coordination with our discussions about a remote dark sky site and purchasing a site for the club, and review the possibilities that a lot of folks drive out to Star. Some of the sites we're talking about are 2 or 3 hours away, and folks working, have family obligations. That's just pretty darn tough to be driving 4 to 6 hours and imaging all night, and you got to go to work the next day or the day after that. That's a tough go, and remote imaging gives you an opportunity to do what you love without risking your life in the middle of the night on the roads or early in the morning after you've been up all night. But in general, it's the hobby is maturing. I also have the ASI Air Pro, and I was up in Palo Duro when it was 20 degrees and the wind was blowing, and I was sitting in my nice warm trailer operating the telescope and taking images. So you don't necessarily have to go full on and have an observatory in Chile, but it's nice to be able to sit in your truck or sit in your RV or tent and operate your telescope while you have some protection from the elements. I'm going to remind folks that there are surveys out there on our dark sky site. I put a hashtag on it. You'll see it DSS survey on the group's IO. You can pull it up, pull the survey up and send it to me if you haven't done one already. I am compiling the results so that we can focus our efforts on buying property, leasing property, and what type of facilities we'd like to have. That's about it. Just wanted to remind on the survey, thank Robert and Jerry for covering for my sorry derriere for not being able to get on Zoom. I logged in and opened the meeting, and then from then on, I could not get back in. I don't know what happened.
No worries, buddy. I hope I didn't foobar it too much.
No, you did a great job. I actually had to watch it on YouTube. I could not even get into Zoom to even watch the presentation from Zoom. So I watched most of it from you. So yeah, you guys did a great job. Appreciate it. And I don't know if Michelle has gotten on or has been able to get on. I know she was without power and internet, and so it's been a trial. Fortunately, we've had power, but I know a lot of people are out of power. And I do want to let folks know coming up, I've actually cajoled, bribed, and twisted Dennis Webb's arm to give us a presentation on Halton Arp's Peculiar Galaxies. Don't know if folks know, but Dennis wrote or co-authored a book on that. It's a great book, and hopefully we'll get him either next month or the month after, depending on how long it takes him to put it together to give us a presentation, and we'll go from there. So, any questions on the presentation that you haven't fielded to either Robert or Jerry? If you want to, you can send me a private email. You know, some of those websites I looked up, some of them I know about, and some of them I don't know about. But it's an interesting hobby and interesting development in the hobby of remote observing. A lot of the software and hardware is really maturing quickly. So I don't think Michelle is on. And Chris, did you have anything to add to the meeting? Anything upcoming?
The only thing I can think of right now is we have March coming up, and March is Mezzi Marathon season. I do plan on doing a star party either March the 6th or March the 13th, and I don't know when that's going to be. It's going to be depend on weather, but my plan is to go ahead and do an all-nighter. Good night. My kid is going to bed. Bye-bye. So I do plan on doing an all-nighter, which is fun and interesting and also extremely exhausting all at the same time. For those on YouTube who don't know, Mezzi Marathon is basically we try to get 110 objects from the Mezzi catalog all at once, all through one night, I should say, one after the other, starting right at sunset, and hopefully catching the last few before sunrise. Usually that's done over several nights, several weeks, but the fun thing is, I think, is to try to do it all in one night in March when all of them are going to be in the sky during one night. So right now my plan is to do it alone, but if anyone is interested, if anyone wants to help, the more the merrier. It becomes much easier with more people. So if I can get 1 or 2 people to help out, we can split the list among us, and we can take better, longer images and hopefully be able to show as many of the objects as we can over the course of an entire night. This will be a long broadcast, but we can do it.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. I see John is on. Again, I was blocked out of it. Did you do any kind of business at the beginning of the meeting?
No, in fact, our internet just went down, so I just switched to a hotspot.
Yeah, everyone's having problems, so grant us some grace here. Did you want to give us a general treasurer's report, John, or do you want
Yes, I can do
Go
that.
ahead.
Yes,
Go
I
ahead.
can do that. So we have our total money in the bank as of this morning is $67,670.57. 16,000 plus change in checking and 50,000 plus change in savings. Major bills coming due. Is Matt still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So you got my message?
Yes, I did. I'll keep an eye on the mailbox for that envelope.
Okay. So the next expenditure coming up is the liability insurance. That should be due somewhere the first week of March. So it should be coming in pretty soon. There's something else I didn't write down. No, I don't remember what it was. So financial audit.
Mm-hmm.
So I will be sending a message to the board, the executive board. We need to do a financial audit for 2020, and it'll have to be virtual. And I've got the material set up, so I need 2 volunteers to assist with that effort. I think Phil was one of the ones last year that worked on that, and Clips. I'm sorry, her name is escaping me right now. The previous treasurer. No, treasurer before that. Well, anyway, the 2 of them did assisted with the audit. It's not difficult. It's just somewhat time consuming. It'll be 2 hours or less. So if you feel the need to expend 2 hours on a nighttime, or if you want to do it during the day, that's okay with me too. But anyway, I'll send that to the executive board shortly. I wasn't quite finished with it, but I've been having problems with networks here with the internet not being up. So it's not quite ready for prime time. We have 166 members as of today. Only 1 person has joined in February. And I think that's all the news worth printing.
Okay. And that's a good reminder, on the audit in general. It won't be long before we'll be voting on officers. I know my term is coming up as vice president. This will be the end of my 2nd year, and believe it or not. And so folks need to be thinking about, being officers in the club. So we still are not having I don't think we have a secretary yet. We would like to get one in place. And John, I'm not sure where you are as treasurer. Do you have 1 more year, or is your 2 years up?
Actually, this is the end of the 2nd year, but I can go as far as 5 years. It's the only position within bylaws that extends beyond 2.
Right. Okay.
And it's my intentions to continue on.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. So, we'll be needing a vice president for programs, and we'll be needing a secretary. And I think a couple of the board members may be coming up for new folks. So It's not too early to be thinking about that, and you know, being involved with the operation of the club is an important aspect. If folks don't get involved, the club really struggles. You know, not to have the leadership and not to have the organization. The other thing too, I'm not sure, but has the lock situation at Star been sorted out? I have not heard back from Michelle. I don't know if we have our lock now back on the gate on the road and have access to the Star, or have they taken our lock off? I'm not sure. Anybody who's been out to Star recently had any problems with the locks? Okay, so Silence says no one's been out to Star in a little while, so if you're planning to go out to Star, you might want to email Michelle and find out if we do have the lock situation sorted out. It'd be a pain to drive all the way out there and find out you can't get in. Okay, I think that's all the business aspects that I can think of. Like I say, I'm just filling in for Michelle finally, now that I got into the meeting. Anything else?
Yeah, I have a couple things I'd like to bring up, please.
All right, Matt, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'd like to remind everybody, this is our first meeting without our club member, Bill Nichols. He passed away not long ago, unexpectedly. And I'd just like to express my sympathies to his family. And I hope all of us as a club will remember him next time we go out stargazing. When the sky clears up again, let's have a good long look at the stars in Bill's memory. And on the subject of some good news, I'd like to praise club member Kurt Wheeler, who I think is on with us right now, who stepped up and helped a gentleman named Chris Fry recently. Chris Fry contacted me through snail mail saying he had some new accessories for his telescope, but due to medical problems, was unable to attach them himself. So I passed that information on to Michelle, and she contacted the club, and Kurt stepped up and was able to help Chris out. And I got the most wonderful thank you letter from Chris, and I forwarded it on to Michelle and Kurt. But I just want to give 3 attaboys to Kurt Wheeler for stepping up and helping out a newbie. And that's all I got.
All
right.
Good
Thank
job,
you,
Kurt.
Thanks, Matt. Real kind comments. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, that's what makes me glad to be a part of this club. We've got so many good people in it. Thank you very much.
One other thing that reminds me, one other thing that Michelle had mentioned previously, and that is the potential for future star parties when we get back out under the stars, and some of the ideas of having touch-free star parties, maybe with video screens, telescopes attached, video or imaging on site. The weather outside right now doesn't look too appealing for that, but coming up in the spring, you know, if we get some nice weather, the folks that are familiar with doing astro imaging, but in real time, live stacking and single imaging, we might be able to get out to Tandy Hills and start putting something together. So that's something to think about, maybe to talk on Groups.io. I'll put a topic out there on where folks are. As vaccinations get spread around a little bit more, we may be able to get out and start doing some public work, but with a little social distancing and using field video or field AP. So That's all I've got. And John gave his report. Anybody else have anything to add before we close the meeting? All right, well, I appreciate it. And once again, Jerry and Robert, thanks so much for stepping up and running through that presentation. You guys did a great job. And hopefully that information is helpful for folks thinking about getting into a remote imaging. Put the resources in there so you can kind of troll around on the internet and find some of these places and some of the equipment that's needed. That's all I have, so I'm going to adjourn the meeting, or at least Chris will. I think, Chris, you're now hosting, so you're going to be adjoining the meeting if once everyone's done.